Hi, I decided to do like I don't know, some proper tutorials for ZBrush. If you browse my channel before, it's just quite random and not very well explained videos. So, and I wanted to do some sort of like aimed and sort of structured videos about where I want to talk about something that's I think is going to be useful for you, for anybody really who's like ZBrushing or learning. Not that I'm a master or anything, but I just like to kind of share stuff. So. This video I'm going to talk about using subtools and extractions and stuff. I'm just talking about how I use them, because I don't know, I think people use them differently, and I don't know, there's multiple ways of getting different areas of detail. I'm just going to be using this old sort of sculpt. Well, not old, it's the most recent character I've done. This is like an early version of it, and what I just did there to get this, if you press the comma tab, it's next to M on my keyboard, and it's also got the left sort of like arrow kind of key. Just press that and you get the light box, which is pretty cool for just browsing around ZBrush. Like you can get access your alphas and textures and stuff. There's also a tool, and I've just put this model in there for easy access, but it's also got all the default ZBrush tools which are available to you. You can use these different starting points, don't be afraid of using that. So comma key, very useful, and I've just drawn it out and pressed T to make it active, and I'm just going to talk about how I can get different sections out, because I think when people are using ZBrush and not used to it, it's kind of intimidating about working with different subtools, but it's not really, it's once you've sort of gotten used to stuff like this and it's easy, all I'm going to do is talk about how I can get some sort of piece where I can use as like an armor or armature or something like that, maybe a t-shirt, or it could be metallic, I don't know. So the first thing that people would tell you to do is to mask out an area like so. I have symmetry turned on. By default, symmetry will not be on. If you press X, that's going to turn symmetry on, or you can go into your transform tab up here, and the symmetry tab is down here, and you have various different axes which you can select from and stuff like that. For now, we're just going to use the default X. If you've drawn your character out to the correct axes, it should work on X. But if not, if it doesn't line up and it's all over the place, just try out the different axes and you'll find the right one. But yeah, most people would tell you to mask out an area you want. And then what you do is you go to this subtool palette and you come down to this extraction window here, and you would go through the notions of figuring out what parameters you need set. Like if you press extract, it's going to show you this sort of preview of this mesh, and yeah, it looks okay. It looks quite thick. So, but if you needed to change that, you can just change here. But since I think they introduced this in 0.4 R2, when you press extract, it doesn't actually extract it straight away. It's only a preview, so you can sort of just angle around and find out what different angles you want. Like if I put in 0.03, so I got numlocks turned off. Press extract, and you can get just different variations of what you can see really. When you hit accept, it's going to actually push this up here into this subtool palette window here. Your extractions will be selected with a mask, so just press Ctrl and drag in an empty space here to get rid of that mask, and you're going to be left with this mesh which looks pretty unworkable. Now, when using subtools, a cool button to use is this button down here called Solo. Okay, you press that, it's going to solo off this the mesh or subtool that is selected. Everything else will become invisible. It's just really useful for quickly isolating areas. Like instead of having to go up here and press this and it turns off all these different subtools, you just want to quickly isolate an area and just detail it. Just press the solo button. Pretty useful. But once you extract something, you'll notice that it's pretty unworkable. It looks a bit messy. A way around this is to use, I just come down in my tool tab, down to the deformation window. There's something called relax. Now these sliders, you just literally slide it to the parameter you want, and it's going to take action on this. Okay, it's just going to come up like so, and you notice now that the edges and stuff are starting to get a bit nicer and so on. Once you extract as well, most extractions are, I think the default settings should give you polygroups around the edges. If you press polyframe here, just makes a colorized sort of preview on your mesh, so you can see different polygroups. So it depends on the thickness you set as well in the extraction parameters here, but this does have polygroups. Now what polygroups enable you to do is to isolate those polygroups using Control and Shift. If I can Control and Shift click, left click on this purple, you'll notice now that the polygroup on the inside of this mesh has disappeared. And if I Control Shift click on the outside, it's going to bring that back. It's not very displayed very well, but the inside is actually a different color to the outside. If I click that, you can now see that we are isolating the inside of the mesh. All the outside is gone, and we also have this edge running around here, which is pretty hard to click with this size brush. Should be able to isolate that somehow. Maybe if I click on again. There you go. So you can isolate this edge as well. Just an idea for using, you know, just thought I'd tell you that so you're aware of it. So now you've got this mesh, right? And the thing I want to talk about is so kind of hair on the mouse lens thing. So what I want to talk about is when you use extraction, right, you end up with this really sort of thin, hollow mesh, which is great if you're going for like the illusion of clothing and stuff. But typically when you're sculpting for video games and stuff like that, I found a better method than using extraction, right? Well, what I tend to do now is, I think it's a bit quicker as well. I'm just going to delete this extraction actually. Well, let me just talk about it a sec. What you can do now is with this extraction is obviously you can come in, turn on symmetry. A quick brush that I like to use is clay buildup, and switch it to alpha 6. It's a sort of soft kind of brush. And what I'm going to do is to make this mesh a little bit more workable, I'm going to go to my geometry tab. I'm going to go to Dynamesh. I'm just going to hit Dynamesh, and it's going to come in. It's going to retopologize this mesh. What Dynamesh does is, if you imagine like a square-like grid across this sort of camera sort of view. Let me just turn on the floor. If you imagine this grid, right, a grid of squares going all the way across, but obviously it'd be a bit smaller, it'd be a lot more squares. What it does is it subdivides or it redraws the topology determined on this grid. You can actually see if I turn on polyframe, you can see this grid is very procedural. It goes straight across, straight down, and this resolution is basically how many squares that you're projecting onto this mesh. And it keeps everything uniform, you know, because when you're sculpting you can often lose resolution in areas like so. And if I refresh my Dynamesh by holding Control and left mouse dragging on anywhere where there's no like polygons, it's going to refresh the mesh, and it's going to re-project the squares all over, which allows you to sort of pull things out quickly and, you know, just redo everything, really, redo the topology, so you're constantly having a fresh, clean topology to work with. But what I like to do with when I extract things is just use clay buildup, alpha 6, and, you know, it's just a nice sort of brush, you know, to quickly sort of pull in designs and sculpt different sort of areas that you want, you know. It just feels nice, in my opinion. You know, I feel like I have a lot of control when I'm using this brush. If you've never used clay buildup before, I suggest you give it a go. Real nice brush. Works with a variety of different alphas pretty well, but I've just found alpha 6 to be something that is, you know, real nice to use. But, you know, you can just come in and do what you want, basically. But I just have a thing, I have a grudge about, I don't like using these hollow meshes now. I find that they take up a lot more polygons because you're subdividing the inside as well, which is pretty much the same as the outside, so the actual poly count is a lot higher. I'm just going to get rid of that. What I like to do now is I literally just duplicate this mesh by using Control-Shift-D, which is the short key for duplicating, which gives me an exact copy of this mesh. I hit solo, And what I get to do is, if I hold Control Shift in, you'll notice where this brush palette here is, it's going to change to something called Select Rectangle. And if I click that, and I click the lasso, it's going to give me the Select Lasso. It's just a quick way of changing different selection brushes. And what I like to do with lasso is, I like to figure out what areas. You just hold Control Shift to drag this out, and it's like just drawing like a shape using any sort of vector program or whatever. And if I hold this down, right, once I've got the selection I want, I can press Shift, and I'm Shift, sorry. I've got Control Shift still held, and if I press space, I can move this around if I want to fine tune the position of this, but this is fine. And what I want to do now is I want to hold Alt to turn it red, which means it's going to hide whatever is inside this red shape, which is this bit of arm right here. If you press solo again, you'll see that it's hidden that. And now I just need to do is just hide out areas. You know, I want to eventually create a I don't know, just a mesh that I want to use to make a new piece of detail for this model. So I'm going to hide out his neck, like so, and maybe a bit more, a bit less than that actually. Yeah, something like that looks good. And what I want to do is now press solo. Actually, I'll keep solo off to show you here. And I want to come down to this geometry tab. I'll turn off Dynamesh if it's on. Just when you duplicate a subtool, it's going to refrain all these settings that you've got set on that mesh. And what I want to do now is I want to press this delete hidden. Now what delete hidden does, right? If I press Control Z to undo that, if I hold Control Shift and click, you're going to get back this mesh, right? Press Control Z just to get my selection back, and if I press delete hidden, what it does is anything you've got hidden by using the select lasso brush, it deletes it basically. If I press Control Shift click, you're going to notice that nothing is there because it's been deleted, right? And now you're left with basically this sort of, it's exactly the same as the underlying mesh, but if I press this button here, close holes, you'll notice now that it's become a sealed mesh. There's no inside, there's no, it's not acting like a shell, you know. It's just a solid mesh to use, right? The topology won't be that good on that fill hose. It ends up being triangulated, but you can just use Dynamesh to clean that up. Use a bit of relax, you know, and you're just left with this really nice mesh. It's going to be a less polygon count. Look at that, it's half. The other mesh was 22,000. This is 10,000. And if I just run solo that as well. And a simple way of getting this usable is using the inflate. Just type in something like 10. Keep going up these until you're satisfied with the thickness. Give it a Dynamesh again to sort out any areas, and you're just left with this real nice mesh that you can use now. Just to get in there and just detail it to what you want. Really, it's going to keep your polygon count lower than using extraction methods. But I just find this method to be real nice, you know, especially on the areas down here where you want to create like an edge. It's really good for mechanical pieces using this method, better than using extraction, just because of the fact that it doesn't have this thin edge going around, which is inevitably going to be a problem when you sort of, you know, creating these edges of these hard surface areas. But it also does work for clothing, because if you notice on most game characters, the clothing will never be, unless it's on the ends, you know where it's noticeably sort of supposed to be like cloth-like material, but that is easily achieved just by, you know, I can quite easily mask out this area here where the arm would be. Obviously I'd put a bit more time into this, and in fact let me just create a little edge so I can better illustrate this point. You know, the illusion of ZBrush is to use ZBrush smartly, but, you know, not, you know, when you look at something that looks really difficult to sculpt, there's usually a method they've used to make it a bit easier to achieve that, right? And I just feel like this method here is a bit easier to use than using the standard extraction in ZBrush. So I don't know, I just thought I'd share this with you so you can use this method just to sort of have some fun in ZBrush. You know how clothing has like that little edge, you know, I put a bit more time into this if I was actually doing it, but for demo purposes, fine. You know, you can eventually pull this out so it looks like actual clone. You know, it looks like the arm is being inserted into that. But it's just a lot easier to use this method. You know, I definitely suggest you give it a go. So that's pretty much it. You know, I probably start off with a bit lower resolution, to be honest with you. It's a bit high. But yeah, that's how I use extraction most of the time. And I quite quickly just select that, duplicate it, turn it off, use my lasso tool to pull out some sort of glove, like so. Then I just delete hidden, close holes, and re-Dynamesh. And it's just so simple, it's so fast just to get out these pieces, you know. Just bring that down one. And then I would inflate it a little bit. 15. And there you go, I have a set of gloves. Quite so simply as well. It's just so much nicer than using extraction, you know. Once you're used to the workflow of just duplicating and selecting, it's just piss. It's really nice. But this is how I quickly, you know, I just figure out different sort of things. You know, I just start pulling stuff out. I just lower down the resolution to something like 80 or 70 or something. Get a little bit lower resolution on these meshes so I can really sort of just see the outline and stuff. But that is how I usually use. You know, and the thing is, you can use on anything. You know, if I wanted some sort of, I don't know, some weird sort of detail around here, right? You know, you can just use it continuously on different meshes. You know. You know, it's just a lot nicer, you know. Nice workable mesh, it's not thin on the inside or anything. If you wanted to create the illusion of it being thin, all you've got to do is just sculpt out the inside a little bit, you know, to get that edge. It's so simple. So that's just my sort of food for thought on terms of using subtools and getting new subtools from old subtools, and my opinion of extraction is useful. Don't get me wrong, extractable is awesome. It's awesome though. I usually use extraction for, you know, stuff like little surface detail, you know, like panels and that sort of kind of thing. Like if I wanted some sort of metal sort of panel here, you know, I'd usually extract it. I wouldn't use symmetry because I would just mirror the image. Never use symmetry when you're doing these small details, right? You know, and I come to my extraction here, and I put in something like 0.002. It's just a setting that I usually use. Press accept, and I'd get this real thin mesh, right? But I like to use thinner settings when using these because the control I have in terms of getting new thickness is just nice. You know, I can use inflate, get what I need, use my Dynamesh here. I'm going to press Control D to subdivide that up here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press B for brush, C for clipping, and C again for clip curve. That's just a setting for clip curves, right? All clip curve does is it allows me to constrain the polygons on this mesh here, because I'm using a selection brush basically. Control Shift is a setting. It would just replace the lasso tool with this, and basically any polygons behind this gradient line are going to be constrained to the line. It's not deleting any polygons, it's just pushing them to that line, and it allows you to just really shape out this edge of this sort of detail we've got going on here. You'll find yourself using this brush tons and tons of times when you're using hard surface, but that's what I use extraction for, just getting out pieces like this. And then I would just go to my Z plugin here, and I would go on this subtool master. I'd hit subtool master, and I'd just hit mirror here. Default settings should be set to X, because that is the correct method of mirroring in Zbrush if you have all the different orientations, right? Press OK, and it's going to go through and just, you know, put that over there for you. Pretty cool. But let's just talk about clipping and stuff. If you press Control Shift again, you're going to notice that it's now this clipping brush here. basically these brushes here all use the same key set, which is Control Shift. If I press here, it's going to now Control Shift will now be that lasso thing. Okay. All I did is use a short key, B, C, C. Okay. If I press this skip note, it's not going to give me that. If I press B, C, R, it's going to give me select rectangle. Get used to using these, figure them out. If you press B, usually it's just what their brush is called, M for move, then it's going to give you a key here, which in this case for move is V. B, M, V is move, basically. It's just a real fast way of selecting brushes. Like, you know, if you watch some of my videos, I'm just usually you hear like some key like that, and I'll start doing some weird shit. That's just me pressing a selection short key, just because it's a lot easier than having to go up here and click. You know, the convenience of just going like this. You know, it's nice. The only problem is though, is that some of the keys are set to this. If I press C, or my favourite V, which swoops colour, you notice that it's going to select different colours. I don't know what it is. I think, alright, if you press C, it's going to colour drop. I forgot about that. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. If you'll notice your mesh is going crazy, you probably just change the colour. So yeah, that's just my little tutorial on using subtools, getting, you know, different pieces out and stuff like that, and my thoughts on extraction. Hope this has been useful. In a bit.